Shout out to those on Instagram. Again, if you want to jump in, see y'all there. Thank you. If you want to jump in, you just go to the website, www.endracismforever.org, click on the link, and you jump in. It's fear. Will I go up to the KKK and demand that they shut down? Heck no. Will I set up my own organization to end racism forever? Heck yes. When I die, will I pass it on? And we have all the members of the organization, we already made a pact. We said, look, if we die today, Big Ron, and for those in Instagram who knows Big Ron, this dude is like he's like 6'10". I mean, this dude been in jail. I mean, he works in Hollywood. He got his own businesses. He's a family man, coolest man I've ever met. He's cooler than me. And he'd be like, Shaman, if anything ever happens, Star, if anything ever happened, you make sure you find someone to replace me. I'm like, all right, cool. Same thing for me. The organization will continue. It will still go on. That's how we got to do it. That's how we shut this down. No matter what people say, no matter how they act, you need to stand firm, stand in the gap, and you need to let them know, okay, fine, all right, whatever. That's your opinion, but we're going to still keep going. This right here is simple. Ending racism and discrimination is the most simplest thing to do on the flipping planet. All you got to do is just wake up and say, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to deal with it. I'm going to make sure that everyone next to me and my family members, they're not a part, they're not a part of it. And then no one treat them the way they do. That's how you end it. You set laws in place to stop calling people majority and minority and start calling people Americans. You're American. Where you live? Oh, okay. So you are from Chicago, America. All right, you from West Side. Oh, you're American. You just jumped over the border. Oh, you're American. All right, okay. We'll try to get you to. That's how you do it. You don't need to do a formula. You don't need to do a story. You don't need to go anywhere and really protest. You just need to come together and say, hey, it's done. It's done. We're not going to do it. If we hear one, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're black. I don't care if you're white. I don't care who you are. You do this, shut you down. That's how it's like you're creating the antidote for the virus within ourselves. Big Ron, our CEO, he says, Star, you got to change the hearts and minds. You got to start within the heart in order to change the mind. I'll be like, all right, whatever. I'm like, all right, you the CEO, or whatever. Because he knows me. He know I'll go in it. I'm a soldier. I see the target, I'm going to go for it. But it takes people like him to say, hey, you know what? And this, I mean, he had, okay, not to get in his business, this guy is straight gangster. Big Ron's gangster. Trust me. He was born in San Bernardino, California, right? That's all I'm gonna say. But he'd be like, look, there are other ways to do this. You don't have to be violent. You don't have to do it this way. He's been in protests. He's been on the news. He went before cops. Cops put gun in his face. And he was like, hey, he went to the chief of, I think it was, and tell me if I'm wrong in the chat, but I think it was somewhere in Corona last year when the whole Black Lives Matter. And he went up this dude is huge. He's like LeBron huge. And he went up to the cop and he's like, you're not gonna do that. And he was able to get him to come to the table and talk. Yes, I'm sorry. Oh, I see. Yeah. Go ahead. Hold on for a minute there, on Instagram. Go there, Paul.
For hosting this. I wanted to push back on the notion of.
Oh, you break it up. I can barely hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me see if I can fix my sound. that any better?
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Perfect. Go
A little
ahead.
better? Okay. I wanted to push back on the notion a little bit of the extent to which hate groups and hate in America can be controlled by individual choice. There is a pretty, and let me just say this, that I'm a former Republican who's now an orphan. So I spent a lot of time kind of looking at the way that my former party is engaging in kind of the media sphere, the right-wing media sphere. There's an industry in raising hate and fear. I mean, I think it was your mom who was talking about fear. She had it. She's right on the button. There is an industry of media now that is raising money, it's raising power, it's raising this sort of thing by drumming up fear. In particular, drumming up fear among people who are not necessarily people of means, but the average, let's say, MAGA voter who is not college educated and white, and making them afraid, right? And this thing that Ron Johnson, who I'm embarrassed to say is from my former home state of Wisconsin, when he was talking about the January 6th insurrection, saying, well, I would have been worried if they were Black Lives Matter protesters, but I wasn't worried because these were patriots. I don't know if you heard that remark he made. And he was reflecting, I mean, that remark, I think, was very telling because it taps into a real feeling and a real fear that unfortunately a lot of Americans feel. This I think your mom is exactly right. It's fear. It's this they're coming to get me, they hate me, they're out to kill me, this sort of thing. And there's a lot of history. You outlined a lot of the history in the background of how American history is entwined with race and racism, and I think you did a very good job. And that's certainly part of it. But we are now kind of in the modern media atmosphere where you have, Fox News and OAN and Newsmax that are trying to make people afraid, because the more fear and anger that people feel, the more likely it is they're going to be tuning in to the news, right? If you're Fox News and you say, if I get on the news and say, well, President Biden did something, but it's not really a big deal, maybe the viewers turn off. But if I go up there and say, this is the worst thing ever, right? And this is the Flight 93 election, that if we don't win, we're all going to die. Then you're going to tune in, and you're going to keep tuning in. And I think that media atmosphere, which is causing this groundswell of fear and hate and anger on a large proportion of people who vote and people who are sending money to some of these figures, that's a difficult problem to get at from a personal matter. I mean, I agree with you from the notion that there are things that we can do as individuals, and I applaud you for pushing on that, and I try and do as much as we can from our perspective as well. But some of it is out of our hands. Some of it is very large, and the media kind of atmosphere that we have to deal with, and particularly a media atmosphere that is dealing in fear and hatred, that makes no bones about it. That's a difficult problem to get at from an individual perspective. And I think a lot of it, I think one of the things that you alluded to earlier, and I applaud it, is this notion of speaking to one another, right? I still keep a lot of contact with as many family members as I can, and friends and former, Republican friends of mine, to try and get a feel for where they're coming from. And that's been very difficult. That's a really difficult thing to do, to talk to people, right? To say, hey, you and I disagree. Can we find places we can agree before we can kind of, decide on what policies we ought to push. And I'm telling you that, I mean, your mom was right. The fear and the hate is very difficult to overcome. If you have taken in with your mother's milk this notion that people of a certain race are to be feared and hated because they'll come and get you if they have a chance, it's very difficult to step outside of that. And one of the only ways it seems that people, when they talk to people who have actually gotten out of hate groups, what seems to be a similar pattern is they've met one person, they met one individual, usually from the race that they were taught to fear and hate, who made them realize that the person was an individual and was treating them as an individual, saying, look, you're Black, I'm white, but let's talk. And you can kind of bring people out that way if you can make that connection. But the large scale is what worries me. The hate map that you pointed to, the scale that we're talking about of people who are being fed a steady diet from certain kinds of right-wing media of fear and hatred, that's what's daunting to me. It's daunting to think about how to, bring these people over. Bringing them over one at a time seems too slow. Seems to, maybe all we can do at a certain level. But that media atmosphere is something that is really daunting, I think, from someone who's concerned about this. One of the things I'll point to, you had mentioned a movie earlier. I'll mention a movie of my own that I think is worth watching in this context, which is A Social Dilemma, which talks about social media and how people engage. And oh yeah, you've seen it. Yeah. So very good watch. It's very, very good watch. And it interviews very many people from Google and Facebook and Twitter and kind of talks about how these algorithms work and how people can turn radical, right? Ordinary people who might have views that are slightly racist can, I'm sorry, you were talking, go ahead.
No, I'm agreeing with you. No,
so yeah, that was my only takeaway, is that I agree that there are things that I would like to be able to do individually, but some of the scale that we're talking about is really outside of, I mean, that's why I think you creating an organization is the way to go, because yeah, individuals, maybe we can reach people across the aisle. Maybe you can make that connection with one or two people, but people are being radicalized at a scale that's difficult to imagine. You know, and I'm like you, I'm around your age. I was in the Marine Corps. I didn't grow up in the digital generation. I didn't grow up in social media. You know what I'm saying? So this is all new to me, you know, and just having to deal with, you know, and I have 6 beautiful children. And so having to, and 3 of them are teens. And so having to kind of engage with them about how social media works and this kind of stuff, it's daunting. I mean, it's frightening, actually, as a parent, I can tell you. It's frightening to think about the amount of hate and toxicity you see online, and how easy it is for individuals to be radicalized, you know. And I'll tell you, the individual, the people who are being sort of aimed at by a lot of these hate groups now are the kind of profile they fit. Families are non-college educated, white, usually lower middle class to lower class, and male, because it's easy for males to be kind of feel alienated in this day and age, right? And that seems to be a similar pattern when you see some of the profiles of some of the, unfortunately, some of the shooters tend to be these kind of young male alienated, right? So why is it that they're so vulnerable to that, and how can we get at that problem? And that's a daunting problem. And I'm involved in education, and I'm a former practicing attorney who's now been in education for the last 15 years. And so the information environment is really what concerns me. How do we address that?